what Paul's saying is grace is going to lead you not just to help people for the sake of saying, I helped somebody today. Grace leads me to love people in such a way that I help them where they really need help. I go and I take away the bags they're carrying. I don't just show up with what I think is nice. And if I've seen Christianity the wrong way, it seems nice. I mean, come on, the guy's struggling, and I told him that Jesus cares for him. Isn't that good enough? I told him I'd pray for him. And I did once, maybe. It was in that general prayer. Father, I met people today who need your help. Would you please remember who those people are, because I forgot a long time ago. That's faith in action, right? Well, it would be if it weren't for James telling us that it's not. James 2:15. Suppose a brother or sister is without clothes and daily food. If one of you says to him, go, I wish you well, keep warm and be well fed, but does nothing about his physical deeds, what good is it? In the same way, your faith by itself, if it is not accompanied by action, is dead. I can see you starting to freak out. He told us last week we were free. He told us 2 weeks ago we were free. He told us last week we got to put our trust in grace. And now he's saying, here are the rules again. That's not what James is saying. Martin Luther thought that's what James was saying. That's why Luther loves Paul and hates James. He couldn't see the connection. Paul said it differently. Paul's concept was, if I'm controlled by the Spirit, then I will be one who is loving and patient and kind and gentle and good. James says, here's how you can tell whether someone is really loving and patient and kind and good. When they see a person who is in need, they help them. They lift their burdens. Maybe if we got back to that as how we interrelate with other people, the church would be a healthier place. Maybe it would actually be a graceful place. Paul seems to indicate that this is what grace looks like. But before I get too concerned and start to put all the burden on myself being the do-gooder, who's got to go around helping everybody, and start to think that you can't spell Christian without I, and I'm so good you need two of me. Somebody will get that spelling joke later. It'll be fine. Paul continues with the rest of Galatians. Well, not the rest, the next 3 verses. If anyone thinks he's something when he's nothing, he deceives himself. Each one, though, should test his own actions. Then he can take pride in himself without comparing himself to somebody else. What are you talking about, Paul? For each one should carry his own load. Not only do I need to be looking and trying to help others so they don't get buried, but I also need to be responsible that my own load or my own weight gets carried. Now, when I start to get rid of some of this stuff, the stuff the legalist taught me that was false, the sin that I realize Jesus has forgiven and I don't have to do it anymore, the idea that I've got to do everything you do or I'm not really the Christian you are, the idea that unless I keep all 600 plus laws of the Old Testament and get circumcised, I don't belong. And when I stop worrying about putting myself in comparison to you, and that's how God will decide who I am, I'm left back with my own load, that which I'm called to carry. Now, like I said, Jesus says my yoke is easy, my burden is light. This thing is extremely easy and extremely light. Now, it's empty, but even with clothes, it's easy and light. That is until I went to Chicago last summer. Wasn't a problem. Well, it was kind of heavy climbing up on the train. But you know when it really became a pain? The sidewalks have nice little grooves cut in every foot or so. You ever tried to roll these two little wheels when you hit the grooves and the bumps? The fun thing is I'd be going along and then suddenly the whole thing would just fly off to the side. Sometimes you're going to have weight, and sometimes you have to be responsible for your own self. Sometimes you're going to have to actually get this. You're going to have to live faithfully, trusting that no matter what does come, this isn't that big a deal. Now, when does it become a harder issue to carry my own load? When I decide to bring all the other baggage with me that I have no reason to carry. Or when I hold on to certain things that other people could help with. Does that make sense? But how many of us do it? No, that's okay. I've got this completely under control. I'll do it all by myself. And then I'll do this by myself, and I'll do that by myself, and before all is said and done, I'm buried. And then I don't trust anybody else because I've got it under control. The reality is, as I start to carry all those burdens, guess what I generally drop? I drop my load. In my profession, do you know what load generally gets dropped while we carry the burdens of the church? Generally the load of the family. See, it's good I'm single. But generally the wife and the kids suffer for the sake of the ministry. I get excited about something that's not really my focus, and I start to carry that, and then what I was called to do gets left behind. What are you likely to lose? What are you primarily responsible for that gets lost as you carry the burdens? And what burdens, first of all, do you need to give to God? That they're only burdens because you continue to do what Scripture tells you don't do. And then it weighs you down on your conscience. It may cause physical and mental harm. What do you do that's sinful that you need to confess and let Jesus carry that? And what other things are you afraid not to become associated with others and allow them to accomplish the goal? Paul says it this way. I think this is what Paul basically says, all right? You want to write down what Paul's telling you your advice is as a Christian? Here it goes. You're going to like this. When it comes to your stuff, be quiet, get it done, and keep to yourself. Okay? When things overcome you, or you're going to ask for help. And when you see others who are overcome, that's when you help them. Generally, you look at the people I mentioned earlier in the sermon, they do the exact opposite. When it's time for them to accomplish what they need to carry, what do? They complain, they moan, and they kvetch. I don't know what that means in Yiddish, and if it's bad, I think it is, forget it. They gripe about what they have to do. And they're really hoping somebody else will take their load for them. And then they get really concerned about your burdens, but generally not for your sake, but for their sake to feel more spiritual. It's the issue in Galatians. These Jewish Christians want to burden the other people down so they can feel the same weight they're carrying around. And Paul says, here's the problem with that. You guys have missed the gospel. You've missed the cross. You've missed the grace of Jesus. We're called to a life of basically being responsible, nice people who really take care of their own stuff so that with their spare time and their freedom, they can use it to help other people who are in need. And which people do we start with as the church?